Through. Yeah, Mr. Coleman, no. Mr. O'Connell, no. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right, we'll begin with RS 2016-174, sponsors Pridemore, O'Connell, and others. This declares surplus and approves the disposition of certain parcels of real property. I stepped out just as there was discussion of deferring this in budget. Can someone tell me what happened? Withdrawn. It was withdrawn, okay. Does that mean we automatically? Second? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we withdraw. All those in favor? Is there any discussion? Okay, opposed? Like sign. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mr. Bedney.
Yeah, is this first legislation the one where the cities provide? We discussed this before, John Cooper?
Surplus property?
Yes.
Yes.
So why are we deferring this? I missed that.
I missed why we withdrew it in the budget. Mr. You're here somewhere. Glover.
It was my understanding the sponsor had requested it be withdrawn, and we withdrew it in Budget and Finance. That was what I think I heard. Mr. Cooper, is that what? Okay, so yes, we at the request of the sponsor, we withdrew in Budget and Finance.
And there was no discussion in Budget and Finance?
There was no discussion, right. It was the move to withdraw, and we voted it up. Unanimous.
All right.
Who's the sponsor?
O'Connell?
That's correct.
Pridemore is the primary sponsor.
Yeah, okay.
Well, can we ask them to tell us that they want to withdraw it?
He has left the building. We can reintroduce if we...
I don't mean to, Chair, I don't mean to say that I don't trust Mr. Glover. I just, usually we ask the sponsors to withdraw. So that's why I was asking.
Okay, well then by rule, I don't think Mr. O'Connell nor Mr. Pridemore is here. So, well, I'm just saying, then we can defer by rule if we need to.
This is surplus property. Can you speak on this, Councilmember Gilmore? One moment.
I think if he asked me to handle his bills, and I'm sorry I was back there talking, so I don't know that we need to. I guess he said if some things needed to be deferred, they could, and so I just wanted to hear the question before we just went and deferred it, and just to let people know, our colleagues know that he was prepared and that I was back there talking, but he asked me to handle his bills. So yeah, but he said if anything needed to be deferred, that it could, but it's not just because he's not here.
Right. Okay. Thank you for saying that. We just all were wondering why it was withdrawn. Does anyone know?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Well, with all due respect to Councilor Gilmore, I still would like to have a letter from the sponsors. So I'm okay if the committee wants to defer, that's fine, but not speaking on behalf of somebody that is not here.
And that's fine. I'm just sharing with you what he said.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Then I mean, we did withdraw it in Budget and Finance. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's what we did. But for sake of clarity, then I will move that we defer.
Fair enough. All right. I will just need to ask someone who. Here is a sponsor. Councilmember Sledge.
I did. All right, here we go. There was question about how we treat surplus properties, and that is why we wanted to have further discussion about it. That's why the bill was withdrawn, Councilman. So I would request that we do the same as we did in Budget and Finance and withdraw the bill.
We just were looking for an explanation. Thank you. And we actually have already voted, so I don't know that we can actually really vote again anyway. But I appreciate the discussion, and it's good to have an understanding of what the purpose is. I suspect we'll see those again. My understanding was that mostly that was unbuildable in very small properties anyway, but we'll bring it back. Okay, so we will now move on to RS 2016-175, sponsors Pridemore and Allen. This approves a grant from the Tennessee Historical Commission to the Metro Nashville Historical Commission to provide continuing education for staff at the National Alliance of Preservation Commission's biannual forum. And there is a letter from Councilmember Pridemore. Thank you. Second. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Next is RS 2016-179, sponsors Pridemore and Pardue. This approves an amendment to the lease agreement between Metro Government and Greensboro ILP by extending the term and amending the rent and the auxiliary parking provisions for the domestic violence program. I do have a letter from the sponsor. That's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion is recommended. Next is RS 2016188, sponsors Allen and Elrod. This authorizes HOA Holdings LLC to construct and install an aerial encroachment at 184 2nd Avenue North. And I'm the sponsor. I move for approval. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Resolution is recommended. Next are bills on third reading. Skipping anything. First is RS 2016116, sponsor is Kendall. I do not see the sponsor here. Is he in the building? We will move that to the heel. Please remind me. We'll move on to BL 2016139. Sponsor is Swope. Did he stick around with us? Councilmember Swope, we're on your bill. All right. This approves with conditions. Let's see. This changes 5.43 acres from R40 to SP zoning for property located at 511 Old Hickory Boulevard to permit an assisted care living facility with 68 beds. And the sponsor is here. It's been moved and seconded. I see request to speak from Fabian Bednay. Mina Johnson, is that on this bill or did I blaze right past you? Okay. Councilmember Bednay.
If Councilman Swope can tell us, at the public hearing, we heard from the neighbors that had a series of issues. If you could please expand on how you addressed that. I'm sure you did, so just for the record, thank you.
Councilmember Swope.
I'd be glad to. Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been an interesting project, one that the neighbors originally didn't like, and now I'm at about 95% approval rate on it. Part of that had to do with blasting, which on the third community meeting, they brought a full blasting team to the table, addressed all the neighborhood issues, and the two people that were worried the most about blasting basically have written me letters saying, we have absolutely no concerns with this anymore. I had deferred this after second reading for the purpose of possibly moving this facility from this piece of land to another piece of land within my district. That does not seem like it's going to happen because the owners of the other piece of land are far too greedy. So as a consequence, it's a good use of land for the way it is right now. They are very good neighbors. Brian Durbin and Arcadia have gone out of their way to change their layout of their facility, change the elevation levels of it, address all the blasting issues. They're doing screening walls as well as tree foliage between this facility and Copperfield subdivision, which is basically 4 homes that are being affected here. And I ask that you approve this.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, Councilmember Bednay asked exact same question I wanted to ask, and I would like to thank you, Councilman Swope, for working with the neighbors, and for that explanation, I feel comfortable supporting it.
Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
It's recommended. And happy birthday to your wife. Okay, we will back up to BL 2016116. Sponsor is Kendall. I do have a letter from the sponsor. That changes 0.29 acres from IR to RM20A zoning for properties located at 801, 803, and 811 21st Avenue North. And there is a letter to approve. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Bill is recommended. Next, we will move on to BL 2016140. Sponsors are Vercher and Johnson. This amends 21.61 acres of the Carrollton Station Planned Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 308 Carrollton Station Drive to require the traffic improvements within Metro Public Works December 9, 2004 recommendation. And the sponsor is here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move for approval.
Okay. Been moved and seconded by members on the committee. I do see some members in the queue. Would you like to speak further, or shall I? move to the other council members first.
Just briefly, this bill, again, is a housekeeping bill. This is an attempt to correct an error from over a decade ago. This simply addresses infrastructure that was never amended to the original PUD for this particular property. Adding the infrastructure does not stop the project from moving forward. This is just simply a housekeeping bill for the viewing audience.
Thank you. Councilmember Bedney, did you wish to speak on this?
No, sorry, the thing was on.
Okay, that's from earlier. Councilmember Glover. Looking for you. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not positive if it's this one or the next one I need to ask this question on, so I'll ask the question and then I'll wait for your guidance. With regards to vesting, does vesting play on the 140 or the 141?
I'm going to defer that question to legal people in the room. Mr. Cooper, can you tell us on BL 2016-140, this is Carrollton Station traffic requirements? I think I got you finally. Yes, sir.
The vesting issue would actually apply to both bills.
Okay.
They deal with the same piece of property, two different aspects or two different issues related to that PUD, but the property owner would be vested under both bills.
Okay, then, Madam Chair, then I would ask that you indulge my question. Hopefully that we will address both of these with the question. So if I could, I'd like to hear from our legal counsel, and I'd like to hear from the other side's counsel on what exactly does vesting mean here in their interpretation. I realize this is a court of law that probably decided. And if we pass this, what is the next likely action that would be taken? Did I ask that question clearly enough?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess to that question, I might add, I'm going to refer to you, Mr. Cooper. Oh, we do have a counsel here. Multitasking. I'll pick on. Also, perhaps in the same question, if we can discuss we had deferred this for the possibility of you can help me with the language here.
Can you help me with the question? Can you repeat the question, Councilman?
The question is, I would like to hear from both sides. I would like to hear from our side legally on what does vesting mean. I'd like to hear from the other side on if we pass this, what does vesting mean, and what's the likelihood of lawsuits or things of that nature.
The Vested Property Rights Act passed in 2014, went into effect January 2015, and essentially states that the zoning mechanisms that are in place at the time that a developer or owner of property gets, in Davidson County, his final site plan, that's it, and we cannot change the rules or pull the rug out from underneath them afterward and alter the zoning plan. They are vested in what their development rights are. In this case, I think it was January 6th that they obtained their final site plan, and the legislation was filed, unfortunately, after that. So they would have, by the statutory enactment, a vested property rights argument. I will simply caution that that statute is 1 year and 3 months old in Tennessee, which is a blink of the eye, and there is not a lot of court appellate authority construing it. But in terms of the black letter law, they do have an effective Vested Property Rights Act.
Okay, and then if the other side is here, I'd just like to hear what the thoughts are with regards to vesting there, please.
Would Mr. White like to come up and speak?
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom White. I represent the property owner in this case. I want to stress at the front end that I've had nothing but the most pleasant relationship with Council Lady Virtue. She's been very polite to me and me to her. Here's what took place in this property. My client owns the property with respect to the use on the property, as has been stated by both John Cooper and by Mike Jameson. Although there's no case law yet, the black and white law is very clear. There's a vested right in my client's use on the property. And the history is that when my client started moving forward on this project, there was initially a request by Council Lady Virtue to have the site be declared inactive. It's a planned unit development. And it was perfectly obvious that the PUD was active under all the requirements. They had spent more than $100,000. And end of story, the Planning Commission staff and the Planning Commission both clearly stated it's an active site. And people came down to the Planning Commission meeting. It was, as I said, unless I'm not recalling correctly, it was a unanimous vote. It was active. It was perfectly obvious it was active. After that took place, the council lady had a hand in introducing both 1040 and 1041. And if there's one thing they're not housekeeping amendments. Basically, these two bills try to go back and say that the number of units should be decreased to a certain number, and this first bill talks about the public works requirements. The public works requirements that were first enacted were when there were more than twice this many units planned on the site. As the client came back through, they decreased the number to less than half. They went through all the metro departments. All the metro departments said there are lesser requirements because it's basically far lesser density, and on that basis the client was approved, and as Mike James or John Cooper once said, it came before the planning department in January, and it was approved for a site plan, period. That clearly locks it in as a vested right, which means on the face of it that there is a total nullity to what's being proposed here. It attempts to take away property rights, which you cannot do. That was the whole purpose of the Tennessee Vested Rights Act of 2014. And so my comment to you is the legal department, and in my opinion, the legal department sometimes gives legal opinions on other things. Sometimes they just say it's a decision for the council and they'll figure out where it is. In this case, they were very clear. They wrote to every member of this council and they said on both of these bills, I'm reading for their opinion, quote, "It's therefore Metro Legal's opinion that ordinance 216-140 and ordinance number 216-141 are unenforceable as to the men of valor." So the biggest issue I've had here is it's not going to change anything. The client's out there under construction right now. It's not just that it's an academic vested right, they're under construction. What is the purpose of these bills? If it's not basically to cause some confusion, and people will come down to different meetings and they'll think, are we going to have a vote on what takes place on this property? There is no vote. It's a vested right, they're under construction. And I've said to Council Lady Vercher that from the very beginning, I met with her probably 2 or 3 months ago in the council staff offices. I had the leadership of my client there. We showed all the elevations. I explained the vested right, and she asked if we would attend a neighborhood meeting. And I told her we absolutely would attend a neighborhood meeting, period, as long as there was an explanation that the vested rights bill was here and had some applicability. So people...
I think that's a point of order. I believe that the technical question about vested rights has been answered.
I'll finish on the note that we have been clear. We'll go to any public neighborhood meeting if there's a clarification that basically the vested rights bill applies, so people don't come to meetings and think they're going to vote on whether something takes place. Thank you for your courtesies. It's obviously a vested right, and these bills do nothing but cause confusion and are unlawful.
Thank you.
So I want to come back to Mr. Jameson, if I may, very quickly with my final question. If this passes, what I'm hearing is it virtually has no teeth to it. Is that, or am I misinterpreting what I hear?
Well, there is an email from Mr. Herbert from the Metro Codes Department that has obtained the opinion that because it would be vested, that any action by this council in approving those bills would be a nullity, and that the Codes Department would move forward with permitting. If you think about it, that essentially frees the council up to do whatever they want to do.
If we, then, I'm sorry, I do have one, then the closing question. If we pass it, does that open the door for a lawsuit to Metro? I mean, is there any possibility of that?
Yes, but under two separate realms. There are a variety of claims that might come under a disability realm, under the ADA, the Fair Housing Act, the religious land use, federal and state provisions. And because all of them essentially define the intended constituency here, which is housing for formerly incarcerated individuals, some of whom have addiction issues, they qualify as disabled individuals and therefore are protected by the state and federal legislation. And any action by the local government that even diminishes their housing opportunities, it's not as if you have to just eliminate them, but if you diminish their opportunities, that can be a violation of any of those provisions. And so whether or not we'd be sued, the council did receive a letter from the attorney Larry Crane, who ends the letter stating that he's been authorized to pursue litigation, which suggests to me that he'll file suit.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like for the Planning Commission to let us know why they disapprove both of these bills.
Let them speak.
Was it because of the previous discussion?
Okay, whoops. Okay, your mic is hot.
We didn't have the opinion from the Department of Law at that time, but they did have a lot of the commissioners had a lot of discussion about the plan that had just been approved in January, and the fact that they had been proceeding with the plan that had been approved in January and just the July before that, and therefore they felt that they should just stick with the plan that had been approved.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Murphy. Okay, Councilmember Murphy.
I was looking back through the comments and notes or minutes from the staff meeting, and I'm not sure, Chair, who could answer this, but it says that Ms. Farr noted that that we can't put the burden on one project when there are 1,000 units coming on board. Could that be explained a little bit further? Are there other projects that are being developed around here that these traffic improvements would be assigned to, or can that just be fleshed out a little bit?
Planning.
The original PUD was approved for a number of townhomes, 126, I believe, townhomes, as well as 8 single-family units and about 14,000 square feet of non-residential uses. This applicant had decreased the number of units that they wanted to include to 60. There have been other projects that have been approved in the area, and then if a traffic study has been associated with those projects, they would have to do what's in their particular traffic study, not necessarily the requirements here. There are a number of the requirements that have been assigned to the non-residential portion of the PUD that is not yet being requested for development.
Let's see, Councilmember Bedney, did you wish to speak again?
Yes, thank you. For the record, I'm good friends with Raul Lopez, who is involved with Men of Valor, so I just wanted to clarify that. I think that we have an issue, I know we have an issue with infrastructure in the southeast. And so I thank Council Lady for bringing that up. I mean, it was for whatever reason, the fact that that wasn't included there creates a hardship with the community. So if as a committee or as a council we are going to vote against this, then I would like to ask Mike Jamison, how can we create a rider to the legislation to request that the city of Nashville pays the repairs immediately together with that project? I mean, that's a real need that she's talking about. It's not something manufactured, and I think it's important that we, if we are not going to support her in these efforts to get that infrastructure taken care of, that as a city we dedicate the budget, the funding to do those repairs ourselves.
And I think that's exactly what you would do. I would not attach it as a rider to this legislation if the concern is as its viability, but take it up as a separate measure in the capital improvements budget. I think that's precisely an appropriate direction.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I do understand a vested and unvested argument, but this particular bill 140 is asking for traffic study. I understand it can be undue burden, but I'm having a hard time understanding this. Having traffic study can be interpreted as vested. So, could you clarify that?
It's actually not asking for the study, and I'm not certain exactly what you're looking at, but it's actually asking for the improvements at the two intersections there. So it's actually asking for those capital inlays, not merely a study. I will note, and not to repeat the analysis, but there is a curious history here that we just have not been able to get to the bottom of. This is a 12-year-old piece of legislation, and it started with a council member, Jason Alexander. In the proposal before the Planning Commission, there was a specific recommendations by the Public Works Department for these two intersections to be addressed for the additional population that was anticipated to be coming in. For reasons that we cannot discern, that did not make it into the final bill. It changed sponsors from Carl Birch to Jason Alexander, or vice versa. We went back and looked at 11 discs of videotape, as did Councillady Vercher, went back and read minutes, and it is unclear why those recommendations were not included in the final bill, but they weren't. But this legislation does clearly call for more than the study. It calls for re-implementing those two intersection repairs, if you will.
And could I ask planning to describe the pieces of the infrastructure improvements? It's my understanding that some are attached to retail portion of the PUD and some are attached to the residential. Can you explain that, please?
That's correct. When the PUD was revised in July of 2015, the only assigned improvement to the residential portion was a left-hand turn lane. The remainder of the improvements that had tagged along on this PUD since it was adopted by the council originally, those were to go with the 14,000 square feet of non-residential uses when that's developed.
And is there a traffic study to support that division of the traffic improvements?
There was a traffic impact study originally. Public Works would review any final site plan and could require something more.
Okay. So with regard to Councilmember Bednay's, I guess this is a question for council, can we request at least some investigation of whether that's an appropriate division of the original traffic?
Sorry, can you?
I'm asking. The traffic impact study was done 14 years ago. 12 years ago, excuse me. There were several things that were suggested to be done.
Correct.
And between them, they are still somewhere in the PUD, just not attached to the residential piece of that. And my question is, how is the decision of what to attach to this piece made? And is there a possibility to ask for additional traffic study to determine if that's an adequate division?
Well,
if not the whole thing, which Councillady Vercher is asking for.
I think the contention now is that because those traffic studies were applied to the development as originally proposed, and now it's down to, I don't know what fraction of that we're at now, but it would not, if it were proposed today, it would not have triggered a traffic impact study because of the volume that you're at now.
I hear you.
Which may have been the reason they amended it out, but that's the reality.
Okay. Are there other questions? Let's see, I have Councilmember Vercher, have you circled back around? Okay. You are recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's just clarity and for those viewing as well. Although there was a reduction in density, can legal address the capacity on that property with the stated use? Because although there's a reduction in density, the numbers are still almost equitable for what they intend to use on the actual development.
You might get a better perspective from planning, but
okay.
What I could add to that is, as I understand it, it is appropriate to consider over the span of years of a lengthy development process, if the specific proposal is reduced in volume, but the area has expanded in terms of population, it's appropriate to maintain that requirement for that individual use. Whether or not we've crossed that threshold here, I don't know. That's more of a planning call.
And does planning want to comment on that?
The use that they are proceeding with now has been determined to be the same use that they applied for originally. And so all that we have in comparison is the original 126, I believe it was, units reducing down to 60.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And one more question, just for clarity and for the viewing audience also. Does Metro still hold the bond for this property?
I don't know. I understand that there's still litigation going on.
There's still litigation.
With respect to the
Okay.
bond.
I'd like to go ahead and renew my motion. Move for approval.
So moved and seconded. All those in favor? I think we need a raising of hand vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. opposed? Not voting? Motion is approved. You have to tell me. Okay. I'll do the math later. Next is BL 2016-141, sponsors Gilmore and Johnson. This amends 21.61 acres of the Carrollton Station Plan Unit Development Overlay District for property located at 308 Carrollton Station Drive to permit a total of 30 multifamily units, where 60 were approved per preliminary PUD revision and final site plan. Yes, Councilmember Gilmore.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is the first time that I've done this, but I've talked to Mr. Cooper, but I would like to eliminate my name from the bill, but with a brief explanation. I just wanted Mr. Cooper to explain what that would do to the bill, and then I'll come back and explain.
Okay, Mr. Cooper.
Well, if a sponsor removes his or her name, then basically you go to whoever the next sponsor is on the bill. In that case, it would be Councilmember Karen Johnson. So, I mean, that's really, it takes it down to one sponsor.
And that sponsor is not here.
Okay, and so it would defer it. Okay, so I just would like to offer a brief explanation, if I may.
Yes, please.
So first off, I really want to thank Councilmember Vercher for allowing me to carry the bill. And originally when I did it in good faith, and I really want to help the Antioch community. So I'm a big supporter, and I believe that infrastructure should occur everywhere. However, I was here when we did get sued as a city, and I'm just looking at it. It's saying that they have vested rights as a state. They're saying that it could be a religious and also a disability. And I was here during that time, and we did get sued for $1 million. And in addition to that, all the council members, it wasn't optional. We had to come and take training. Yes, we had to come and attend the training. So I do want to support the Antioch community, but sometimes when you go forth and you, as an elected official, some people can say you're wishy-washy, but as you find out more information, you have to make a decision. And so therefore, I still support them, but I do think with this bill, I do have some hesitation, and I do want to eliminate my name. But once again, I do thank Councilmember Vercher, and I appreciate her so much, and I did speak to her earlier and share with her that I would for the following reasons, and those are the only reasons for the three that I have shared. And so with that, I just want to share that again. Thank you.
Defer by rule. It's been put. All those in favor? Okay, defer. Thank you for that discussion, and I will just reiterate that we have discussed supporting the council member in her request for capital funds for infrastructure improvements there. I will give you the courtesy of one last time to speak, although that's probably not officially right. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Wanted to ask the question to legal with the property and the bond still being pending litigation. How does that impact the issuance of permits?
It won't. Will it affect the issuance of permits with the bonds being in litigation?
No, I don't. And I believe I can get the details on the litigation, but I think that there is an agreement and the bond issuer is paying the money in, and Men of Valor is going to pay some money so that all of the required improvements are completed without Metro being out of pocket any. That's my understanding, but I can get confirmation from the attorney that's handling that case.
That would be good for tomorrow night. Thank you very much. Okay, other questions? Thank you for good discussion. Next is BL 2016-144. Sponsor is Kendall. This changes 0.41 acres from R6 and CS to RM20A zoning for properties located at 410 and 412 36th Avenue North and 36th Avenue North unnumbered north of Charlotte Avenue. I have a letter from the sponsor to approve. Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is recommended. Are there any late items? Planning Committee is adjourned.